Hi folks, welcome to the Cannabis Corner. I'm your host, Kerry Burns. You know, prior to the passage of the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act, there was a lot of propaganda going on about trying to get cannabis and hemp and all those types of things illegal. Of course, you had William Randolph Hearst, the big newspaper publisher who he owned vast amounts of timber reserves and stuff, and he was steadily writing himself, personally writing and putting out all these propaganda commercials about cannabis. And I mean, really going to the point of, saying ridiculous things like people were dying from it. It was nothing but a gateway to crime. If you're a male and you smoke marijuana with a resist to the urge to rape some woman is just going to be too much to resist, and you're going to just be all caught up in all that. I mean, they had every kind of commercial and every bit of propaganda under the sun going, and he was doing his best. He was a lot of the stuff that was going on. It was kind of like everything was working together. It's like they had this big group meeting of all these different facets, and they said, "Okay, William Randolph Hearst, you take this section here." Mellon, who was the banker at the time and the uncle of the person that Anslinger's married to, of course, he had ties to DuPont, and everybody knows right at the same time they were trying to get the synthetic patents of rayon, dacron, orline, taken off into the mainstream. They had just secured them from the Germans, so there's reason to suspect that they had something to do with it and all. People weren't really quite sure about Anslinger at first, because when the states started to petition the federal government for some type of law to control marijuana, Anslinger really himself didn't want to be a part of it, because I mean, right outside he could go down the Potomac River not too far, and marijuana was growing everywhere. Hemp farms were right and left. I mean, and he was quoted as saying one time he took a good friend of his out there, and they stopped right there on the bridge over the top of the river, and he says, "Look out there," he says, "everywhere you look is all you can see is cannabis growing, and they want me to outlaw that stuff. How in the hell am I going to do that?" Well, so he resisted it for a while, but his bureaucratic prowess that he had about himself, he eventually turned the tide. And then when he decided that he was going to go after marijuana, then it was Katie barred the door. It was just like, it was the worst thing, and he himself even started being part of the propaganda, helping write some of the stupid shows and stuff and commercials like Reefer Madness and things like of that nature. And it was just really dumb. I mean, they were based on nothing. They were all made up. They were all lies. But you had a public there that was recovering from it was post-Depression. Things were really sour for most people. They'd already gone through the Dust Bowl. I mean, there were just a lot of events going on in this time when this passage of this act came about. But one of the big key factors probably of all this combined, you can look at Randolph Hearst and his paper and his timber reserves and how hemp would have threatened that. You can look at Mellon and his connection to Anslinger and DuPont and all that, and the synthetic fibers and stuff. And yeah, there's some connection there. And but one of the biggest issues was the race card. And down in the southwest part of the country at this time, there were a lot of Mexican migrant workers that were out of a job. We were post-Depression. Most of the farm jobs and stuff like that were gone. And these people really were just, hanging out. They weren't doing anything. And they were a threat to the local people down there for some reason. It wasn't like they were committing crime or anything. They just didn't want them around because it was like, just a bunch of excess people hanging out. And this was one of the reasons the states was pushing the federal government to come up with a law against cannabis, because they knew that the Mexicans smoked cannabis. They knew that nearly all of them used it. It's something they'd brought from Mexico and stuff. And they thought, wow, if we could get a law against it, we could repatriate and move these people back south. And so after they finally convinced Anslinger and his cronies at the Federal Bureau of Narcotics to go ahead and start talking about passing the Marijuana Tax Act, of course, the biggest thing that Anslinger himself was up against was the Constitution. He knew it was constitutionally wrong. He knew he couldn't just come out and declare a plant illegal, particularly one that had the industrial effects that the hemp had and all. He just knew that his back was against the wall. And then you have a medical field that's telling you that the medical benefits of the cannabis is far too great to even consider doing something like this. But then he figured out the entrapment plan, and that was the one that he actually got from another plan that they had done in Congress to get rid of machine guns. And they were trying to get rid of all the illegal machine guns out there, so they said that everybody had to have a certain type of permit to carry it, and you had to bring the machine gun in to get the permit. And then when the people brought the machine guns in to get the permit, they took the machine gun away from them. And it was pretty much a lie. And this was how the Marijuana Tax Act came about. You had to bring your marijuana into the Treasury Department there to get your stamp. And as soon as you walked in with the hemp, guess what? You were in possession of hemp without having the stamp. So it was a form of entrapment. And this was the whole joke of it. And this is what scared people away. And it's really what ultimately led to it becoming illegal. The entrapment phase has been used again time and time again. I mean, you look at the modern day today, they have these cops, they'll park a van out there, they'll have a guy sitting behind the driver's seat, he's selling crack cocaine or marijuana out the window. As soon as the guy that comes up and buys it from this police officer that's sitting behind the wheel, boom, the back doors of the van open up and out jumps 5 more cops and they place the guy under arrest. I mean, if this isn't entrapment in its finest hour, and it's illegal, it's completely against the Constitution, yet this is one of the tools that they use. The racism card was played again in the 60s prior to the passage of the Controlled Substance Act, when we had the hippie movement and all, and that's one of the reasons they went after it and all. Ronald Reagan and them, they hated the hippies and the hippie movement and this anti-establishment and all that. And so they knew that that was one of the main things that the hippies did, was smoke marijuana and free love and that type of stuff. And so they used it against them, and that they played the race card then. And then when you look today, of course, they were the first to say that anybody that supports marijuana coming from the south of the border, you're supporting terrorism, because terrorists come into this country through our borders. And therefore, if you're supporting illegal activity across the border, well, you're either a terrorist or you're supporting terrorism. And smoking marijuana, in case the DEA or our government didn't know it, has nothing to do with terrorism. And it doesn't have anything to do with harming anybody or trying to cause crime or anything like that. So there were a lot of lies, lots of reasons that this substance came about to be on the Controlled Substance Act. And even though they used the Singles Narcotic Treaty in 1961 as their constitutional reason for forming the Controlled Substance Act, and that they were going to protect the public from this, this big scare, this abusive type, this horrible plant, which, up until that point and prior to the Marijuana Tax Act, had really been, kind of a beneficial boon, not only in the industry, but also to people who wanted to just smoke it for relaxation and recreational purposes. And all of a sudden, this thing was just the worst thing that it was. And even after the passage of the Controlled Substance Act in 1970, it really there wasn't a lot of people. They really didn't look down at pot smokers too bad. I mean, there were a lot of people that frowned against it and all, but you could walk down the street smoking a joint and really not get hassled. But after Reagan and Bush came in and they started this Just Say No program and really, jumped up the war on drugs and started, this amount of money that the DEA started spending then all of a sudden it became this dangerous substance. And boy, we just got to chase after it. And it's another lie. It's one of the ways that our government works. They did it back in the early days when they came up with the lies and all the stupid videos and all the reasons that they said that they were going to make it illegal. They used entrapment as a way of enforcing it and tricking people to thinking that they, had a way of possessing cannabis without going to jail. Of course, all of that was a lie. They used the race issue again on the Mexicans in the southwest part of the United States so they could get rid of them, make them go back across the border, because now they're in possession of marijuana. Certainly they're dangerous criminals, and we can't have those around our citizens. They use it to downplay the jazz movement in New Orleans, because all the blacks in the jazz movement all smoked reefer. They always said that jazz and reefer went together. And it's just time and time again our government has used racism and entrapment to go against this plant and to try to sway their case as to why we have a drug enforcement agency, why we have a law called a Controlled Substance Act and all, why we have a Singles Narcotics Treaty that is worldwide. These are all issues that contributed to that, and I think that they all played their part. But I do believe that the race issue, and I do believe that this entrapment enforcement were two of the key things that got cannabis illegal and maintained to keep it there. And they used these to lock as many people up as possible. And this is wrong. We all know that's wrong. It's unconstitutional. It goes completely against what America's all about: freedom of choice, individual rights. It's just gone out the door there of how runaway our government has become. And I want to thank all of the people that watch the Cannabis Corner videos, and I appreciate all of the comments that you all write in and all. We don't get to answer all of them, but we do read every one of them, and I want y'all to keep those coming in. And also I would like that every one of you that watch these videos and all, send an email to your congressman in your area. Find his email address or his address in Washington, wherever it is. Send him information. You tell him that you're sick and tired of this drug enforcement agency. You're sick and tired of this war on drugs. You're sick and tired of people going to jail for smoking cannabis when they have Jack Daniels just flowing out of the grocery stores, and prescription drugs leaving the doctor's office hand over fist. Do that, please. Every one of you that watch these videos, please take it a step further for us. Get this information out there. Educate people who are ignorant to the facts, and please, please, please send the Drug Enforcement Agency an email. They need to be brought down to their knees. They're an institution like this Homeland Security that is just running out of style, and we have got to put the brakes on them, because it's events and agencies like that are bringing down this country, and they're destroying our Constitution. So send them an email, send them a letter, tell them how you feel about it, and don't be afraid. That's what they hope. They hope that this fear thing, this fear of being arrested, and all these lies that they perpetuate day in and day out, they hope that it scares people to the point that they won't stand up and fight. But I urge all of you, if you're watching this video, use that as your strength. And if you have to, tell them Kerry Burns told them to call you, and express your opinion on this. And eventually, we will start making a difference. And I thank every one of you for spending time in the Cannabis Corner.